One of the most interesting Wonder effects in Super Mario Bros. Wonder is the one triggered during the first Bowser Jr. boss fight. You know the one, where first you become big and Bowser Jr. becomes small, and then vice versa. So over the past few weeks, I've gotten countless questions about how this fight works, and whether it might be possible to use the effect that changes the player's size outside of the fight. In fact, just a few days ago, I released a video where I tried messing around with the fight by using a Wonder transformation in the middle of it, which had some strange results that I didn't fully understand at the time. But here's the crazy thing, as was first discovered by Hey64, what if I told you that throughout this entire fight, the player's size actually doesn't change at all? Okay, so first of all, let's establish some stuff. In last week's video, I said that Bowser Jr. doesn't actually trigger a Wonder effect. The resizing thing is just a part of the code of the fight itself. Well, it turns out I was dead wrong. Although it's not a part of the actor configuration, Bowser Jr. does in fact trigger not just one, but two different Wonder effects throughout the fight. As I've previously discussed, there are two types of Wonder effects which get controlled by two different parameters of the Wonder tag object. There's the Morph player type, which controls player transformations, like the Goomba or the Wabba, and there's the Player Wonder type, which usually changes the controls or physics of the player in some way, like during the top-down effect or when you're in space. The Bowser Jr. fight triggers Player Wonder Type 8 when the player becomes big, and Player Wonder Type 9 when the player becomes small. So, mystery solved. If I trigger one of these effects in another random level, surely that will... Oh. Okay, so the player is still the same size. But wait, look at that. The physics are as if the player is big, including the camera shake when I hit the ground. The player's animations are also a lot slower. Sadly, doing a ground pound doesn't seem to affect enemies like how it impacts Bowser Jr. If I set the Player Wonder type to 9, we have the opposite effect. Once again, the player is still the same size, but look at that jump. We're also moving very fast, same for the animations. So clearly these are the effects used during the fight. So how come the player changes size during the fight, but not if we trigger the effect anywhere else? Well, here's the thing. Remember that every object in the game has a bunch of rotation and size settings that are rarely used, so we can kind of make any object in the game bigger if we really want to. Which also goes for Bowser Jr.'s boss arena. So, instead of having to deal with the complexities of making the player bigger or smaller, the developers instead decided to create the illusion of the player changing size by changing the size of the room and the camera. The room becomes smaller to make the player look bigger, and once it's time for the player to look small, then the room becomes massive. It's all just an illusion. Actually, unlike the player, Bowser Jr. does become bigger and smaller. In fact, to compensate for the room changing size along with him, Jr. technically becomes twice as big or small as what it appears like. So during this segment, Bowser Jr. is really the same size as like Bowser during the final boss fight of New Super Mario Bros. U, for example. This also explains why this happened last week. The room changes size with the player's position at its center to make sure the player's relative position doesn't change, but because the spike ball transformation wouldn't stop moving even during the cutscene, the game didn't manage to keep the spike ball center during the animation, and thus the player ended up outside the room altogether. I also believe this explains why the player gets lifted off of the ground when they get resized. That just sort of helps to make the transition more smooth, even if it looks a little bit odd. I think the best way of demonstrating the illusion is to fill the room up with a bunch of blocks that don't get resized. Okay, so the room is about to become a lot smaller, and sure enough, now not only the player, but also these blocks are massive. In fact, here, if I keep the block centered the whole time, you can see exactly how the animation plays out without any of the camera trickery. Okay, so once we damage Bowser Jr., we should get some tiny blocks instead, and yeah, there we go. So the room is now actually massive. Oh, I suppose these blocks also once again confirm that Bowser Jr. does truly trigger a Wonder effect here, since they become pink, just like during any other Wonder effect. By the way, the fact that the room gets resized is actually technically noticeable, even without modding additional objects into the area. This is going to be nearly impossible to see, thanks to YouTube's compression, but this very translucent layer of fog that moves diagonally upwards and covers the whole background actually doesn't get resized alongside the room. So when the room is small, the fog is relatively bigger and looks like it's moving faster, and when the room is massive, the fog is much smaller and moves slower. Yeah, I don't know if that's going to be noticeable for anyone, but congratulations congratulations if you get what I'm talking about. Anyways, yeah, as it turns out, there is no Mega or Mini Mario effect in Super Mario Bros. Wonder. It's all just an incredibly clever and unique trick by the game's developers. I think the reason for this is that this was easier to implement than having to make a functioning Mini and Mega version of every power-up state of every player. Yes, this means it is also possible to get bigger and smaller versions of Wonder transformations in this room. But now that we know that the player doesn't even get resized, this stuff doesn't really feel that special anymore. Regardless, I think the way it turns out this boss fight works is actually fascinating. Once again, a huge thanks to Jumpahay for telling me about this. In fact, you might be interested in what he's been working on because Jumpahay is actually one of the main developers of the Fushigi level editor. That editor has seen some incredible progress in the past few weeks, to the point where the game's objects are now getting visualized with their in-game models, and that should make the tool much more user-friendly once this feature is publicly released. If you're interested in the continued development of Fushigi or Super Mario Bros. Wonder modding as a whole, I'd recommend joining the Wonderland Discord server linked in the description. I'm hoping to use Fushigi to make another custom level in the near future, so in case you're interested in that, it might be a good idea to also consider subscribing to my channel and blah 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 YouTuber stuff. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this video, thank you so much for watching, and bye bye!